Going on YouTube. It's been a while since I posted something new. Been a little busy at work, the brewery, and some research on the printers. So this guy here is printing out some new MK3S fan shrouds. Yes, they can do 110 the bed, no problem. Using the Prusa ASA for the fan shrouds. I was using the ABST, but I figured since I can do it, why not do the ASA? I think Prusa uses the ASA. This guy here, I just replaced his fan shroud with the new ASA one. It's orange on a red frame, but hot, Eddie, hot. Doesn't look too bad, and it fit flawlessly. The ABS one did too. This guy here, I still need to do it. That's what's printing here, and then I'll do a third one for this guy. So in the last 3 weeks, I've been playing around with the printers, and as you can tell, I used to have 3 bare frames. I now have 2 MK3S Plus. Well, they're MK3S frames with the plus parts. And this guy here, I'm going to reprint everything and go with the MK3S, the stock Prusa frame. Reason being, so this one doesn't print so badly, and part of the problem I'm having is this IKEA lac table amplifies all the sounds. So my first trial is going to be move the brackets from the top of the table on up over to this. This is solid 2.5, 3-inch wood. So the reason I'm doing this, all 3 bare frames have a problem with the Y-axis being noisy in the center. When you start moving around real quick, it thumps. And I don't know if it has to do with zip ties versus the new MK3S Plus screws. So I rebuilt 2 of the bare frames with stock MK3S parts. MK3S Plus parts. This guy here is basically silent. And this is in normal mode, not silent mode. A couple things I did, the X rods I replaced with new rods because this may be the first printer I had, which is over 1.5 years old. So I replaced these 2 X rods with new ones from Prusa. A little expensive. And then all 3 bearings in the extruder and the Y-axis. I upgraded to the Mitsumi bearings. Y-axis rods are the same. So the Y-axis makes no noise. Well, unless it moves 180 millimeters per second, and then it does a little whir, but that isn't a problem. I don't know if the big difference was these new MK3S Plus Y-rod holders with the screw. I'm not sure what changed. Or the Mitsumi. I tried putting Mitsumi on a bare access frame. So a couple issues I'm having with the bare frame. This one will have it, but it's not moving fast enough because I'm printing ASA at pretty slow speed for the fan shroud to make it really pretty. When the Y-axis gets in the center and it starts moving fast, it makes burp, 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 burp. This side didn't seem tight enough. And this is with the bare Y bearing holders. It may have to do with something like it's floating so high up in the air and it's held with zip ties. I know my Prusa frames, I hated them. The Y-axis and the X-axis made noise. But this guy here is stock. Stock Prusa, basically MK3S. This guy here is going to get the stock frame back, and this time around I'm going to try the new Y-axis clips, the metal clips. So these two, which I'm totally freaking happy with, have all MK3S Plus parts, except for the bearings are still using the U-clamps. But on each of these I spent half an hour using the bare method of tightening clamps. So instead of going, okay, make them flush, the stock Prusa instructions, make them flush. With Nylox, you can't really tell if they're flush or not. So what I did is I screwed them down, all three. It took me half an hour for each one of these to get the bed right. Screw the bolts down equally, and then try to, using my index finger and thumb, try to rotate the bearing and then move them back and forth. 1/8 inch turns until I couldn't rotate it. Rotating it wasn't that hard to do, but moving it back and forth took a little more, another 1/8 of a turn. Once I couldn't rotate them or move them back and forth, I stopped. And as you can hear, both beds are silent. None of this when it gets in the center, burr, 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 none of that. So this guy has new X rods with 6 Misumi bearings, 3 on the bed, 3 on the extruder, MK3S Plus extruder. This guy here, I'm not happy with. This may be the first printer I got, which is over 1.5 years old. The X-axis, when it starts moving fast, you can hear it rattle. This one doesn't do that. So I've got, I'm trying to experiment. This one here, I've got 2 new X rods from Prusa coming, and a whole, so each X rod from Prusa is $11 or so plus shipping. Or from Printed Solid, you can get a complete set, all rods, X, Y, and Z, for $22. So I got both 2 more X rods from Prusa coming, and a complete set of X rods, hardened X rods, coming from Printed Solid. I'm going to see, well, one I'll use in this guy to get rid of that little bit of rattle from the X bearings. I don't know if I didn't do enough maintenance, the crap MK3S bearings, or grooves in the rods, I'm not sure. So a couple mods I've done. All fans on both 3 printers are now the Sun-Ons. And another reason why I went back to the stock frames is I don't know if you no. It's okay. I don't have to modify the stock firmware using stock Prusa parts and the MK3S parts. So this printer here is done. It's quiet. Every 200 hours of printing. I'm going to re-grease everything. It's good enough. This guy here, I'll replace the X rods here pretty soon with the Misumi bearings, and I think I'll be happy. And this guy here, I'm going to replace the whole bear frame. I've got 6 Misumi bearings for the X and Y, and I've started printing out on these two guys all the upgraded parts. So the biggest deal with the Prusa frame, the stock parts, the MK3S, I think are these guys. The new the Y-wad holders with screws. This floating out in La La Land with zip ties, same thing I had with the stock frame. When I used the zip ties on the Y-axis, when it was in the middle and it started moving around fast, both the X and Y, doing little movements. That right Y-rod bearing would jump around and you could hear it thumping. Drove me insane. And this guy here has the bearing chatter of the extruder, but I could have wore out those rods with either cheap Chinese bearings or the stock Prusa bearings, which are too loose. When I get the new rods in, I've got a new toy. I'll measure them against the stock with a micrometer and get it within 1/1000th of an inch. So, what changes have I done to the stock? So, I'm using the Sun-On fan. I don't get jams. I'm not dealing with that. All the extruders on these three have the stock Prusa throat. Well, that was another thing I went through. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I've got some spare parts in here. I can't find it. I rebuilt one of the extruders and following Chris Wakaki's video, and I forgot to heat it up to 175 and tighten the nozzle, the final tightening. I had PLA or PETG pouring out both the top and bottom. That was my fault. So I've got a spare E3D V6 hot end that I rebuilt for that guy. He was the one drooping everywhere. It was dropping. What a pain in the butt. But I can show you on this guy here since he's stopped. If you're using the Sun-On fan and you can use the stock firmware, you can go to settings, go down to hardware setup, and go down to checks. Hit and hold the button until it beeps, and then you have a new menu item. Experimental. If you have the Sun-On fan, turn that off. That will run it at 255 PWM. So full PWM, 100% PWM. If you don't do that, if you have a Sun-On fan and you reset the firmware, the stock firmware, and start rolling, your fan is only running at 120, half of its voltage. Kind of sucks with the Sun-On fan. But with this set to off, you get the full PWM. You will eliminate all jams on that little cut down that all Prusa printers have for the MMU2S. I've got an MMU2S. I'm debating whether to set it up again. The reliability and dependability on the 3 stock printers without that is fine. So I don't have 3D printed panels. I'd rather have a completed print than something I have to muck with every hour or so for a jam. Basically caused by stringing on the tip. And I'm not into mucking with these things. I just want them to print and as quiet as they can. This guy here is done. I'm not touching it. It's a stock Prusa with the sun on fan, just for longer prints. Heat creep is an issue, even still with the MK3S Plus extruder parts. Why chance it? Sun on fan is not that expensive. It's a stock firmware now. I don't have to deal with, okay, modify your Z-axis so it works with the bare extruder. Just hit and hold on hardware checks until it beeps, go down experimental, alt fan detection, disabled. It passes the wizard. So I've tried the new stuff. I still think the bare frame is better, but I have these two guys, machinist squares, and I have a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 inch grade AA machinist block, and I still couldn't get the bare frames correct. All three of them made rattling in the Y. One of them, when the Z moved up and down, it growled, and I checked this frame. It was square, but it still growled. These two guys, I went, all right, let's try the stock frame, because Prusa is seeing this plate within a thousandth of an inch. It's hard to screw the Z-axis up on a Prusa frame. They've got it in alignment. You print this part right, you print that part right, these rods are parallel. Now on the Y-axis, you'll want a machinist square to check that you, from the plate, from the middle plate out, you're square. And then with the machinist plate, you can check that you're flat. These two are running fine. This one's running okay, but might as well go stock and not have to modify firmware to make it work. And with the extruder in the stock firmware, there's a heat tube length or the heat tube Bowden length. The bare extruder has 50 millimeters. Well, that was another thing that I'm going to put a new tool up. I'm going to take the bare tool to making that tube and modify it to work with the MK3S Plus. So the MK3 has a 44.3 millimeter Bowden tube for the extruder. The MK3S has to have a 42.3 millimeter tube, or you won't build it right. And I checked the Prusa site, they're still selling what they call 44.3 millimeter tubes. That will not work with the MK3S Plus tubes for the MK3S Plus extruder. If you look at the assembly instructions, they specifically call out, make sure you use the 42.3 millimeter Bowden tube. So I used the stock, and then I cut it with my Capricorn tubing cutter to get it 44.3. So, what am I trying to say? Oh, and another thing, I had that reverse Bowden stuff. the stock MK3S Plus printers print good. You don't have that reverse Bowden tube, which when you run out of filament, you have to unscrew it from the extruder so you can get that little 2 or 3 inch part out and then refill it. The stock Prusa MK3S Plus printer is creme de la creme. Now, post in the comments below if you've ordered the latest MK3S printer. I want to know if they're coming with the Mitsumi bearings or not. And you can tell the bearings. Let's see if I can get this. It's going to be hard. The bearings will say Mitsumi on them. If they're coming with the standard semi-okay bearings, they'll say Korea. Somebody posted down below if the MK3S kit is actually now coming with the new, they say Mitsumi right on them. If they're coming with the Mitsumi bearings. So that's what I've been researching the last couple of weeks. It's like I want a quiet printer that doesn't make a lot of noise and doesn't require a lot of parts. And what I've come up with so far is this guy here is done. I'm not touching him. He's moving around, not making any noise. And it's the stock, well, these guys I replaced. I could have chowdered that, I don't know. The Y-axis makes no rattling noise with the new MK3S Plus screw. I'm not going back to any of the zip tie crap that holds down precision components. It doesn't work. Greg will probably change this in the future, but until he does, I'm totally happy with the stock Prusa MK3S Plus setup. And then this guy here, I'll replace these X rods because as you can hear, that little bit of bearing chatter, you shouldn't have that with Mitsumi bearings. So these rods could be blown. So that's another thing I've done with all 3 of these, and this guy still makes a little noise. So on the Y bearings, I made sure that the bearings are at 45, not straight up and down like the new instructions recommend, because that was cutting a groove. And I do the same thing with the X-axis as an experiment. They say, oh, it doesn't matter. I have the bearings on the top pushed together, and I put a line on the bearing where the ball bearings are, and I make sure that's at 45 on both X-axes. I figured if it's good enough for the Y-axis, it should be good enough for the X-axis. And that gives you more bearing surface so it can't move around. This guy here, I'm pretty sure the rods are toast for the X-axis. The Y-axis, all 3 of these are making, well, this guy's still making a little noise. This guy's not making any, these guys aren't making any noise on the Y-axis. And all I did was update to Mitsumi bearings. They're the stock rods that came with it a year and a half ago. No thumping noise in the middle when it starts making fast Y-axis moves. So the only thing I can figure out is using a screw instead of zip ties. Fix that. Made it tighter. I don't know what's going on. All I know is I removed the bear access on the bear frame on these 2, and I'm going to remove the bear frame on this one. So that's the new fan shroud for the MK3S Plus that will go on that guy. I've got to print one more out because this guy is going to get his stock MK3 frame back. These screws made a big difference. And the print quality, so this is this guy's new MK3S Plus extruded parts. It's fine. So, yeah, technically the bare frame is stiffer, but building it right, I've got machinist squares, calipers, a grade AA block. I still couldn't do it right. I built these frames, I haven't touched since I built them a year and a half ago. I just had them up in the attic. I brought them back down and went, let's try the new MK3S Plus parts. Yeah, they work out pretty good. So that's my 2 cents. If you guys got an MK3S, well, yeah, those that have an MK3S Plus from Prusa, let me know in the comments below whether you got the Mitsumi bearings or they say Korean. Because the Korean bearings weren't bad. I tried checking after I grease them up, so all of these have been greased with this guy here with PTFE, silicone lubricant grease. And then for every week I go and I oil the rods with a synthetic oil, PTFE, impregnated. It's the silicone, same as the grease, so it's compatible. I don't mix super lube with Prusa bearing, because I don't know how to get the Prusa bearing lube after I soak them in 99% isopropyl alcohol. I use the 3D printed bearing injector to make sure they're full. Chris Rakaki has a video out there. Once you put them on, then you run them back and forth on a rod and remove the excess. Until you get the excess removed, they'll be a little chunky, and then once you move them back and forth and get the ball bearings rolling, they'll be smooth as silk. So that's my 2 cents. The bare frame for the last year has been pretty cool, but I've had issues that I just ignored. I'm not ignoring them anymore. Once I got this guy built and it went, oh, he's silent, it prints nice, let's try this one. Now this one I just went ahead and went, all right, let's put new X rods on. Who knows what I did to those? Who knows how I built it wrong? This guy didn't change anything other than reprinted the parts in red Overture PETG, and I'm getting a little bit of rattle. So I've got new X rods coming. The Ys on both of these are quiet, not silent. Prusa MK3Ss are not silent like the Enders, but of course they're printing twice as fast as the Enders, so it's a good compromise. And I get all the added benefits of not having to deal with firmware. I know it's not going to start a fire. The filament sensor works flawlessly. The power outage, because we have brownouts here in New Orleans, unless it goes over 20 minutes, the part sticks to the bed. It continues printing. No flaws. I haven't had any. Well, this one and this one I got last year when they became MK3Ss. That one was an MK3S, but I also got, so this one and this one has the red filament sensors. That one had the black filament sensor, which people think there's issues with. But I also got an MK3, an MMU2S unit that had a new red filament sensor. So all three of mine have the red filament sensor. That's something that comes with the MK3S Plus and will be in the MK3S Plus upgrade. Will be a new filament sensor with the red board. Seems to be more reliable. Mine have always, well, this one didn't originally, but as soon as I got the MMU2 Plus, the MMU2S, I put the red sensor in it, and so all three of mine have had the red sensor, and I never had a filament outage problem. When the filament runs out, it stops, it parks, it ejects a little 2-inch piece. I put new filament in, feed it, clean the tip, and away it goes. I don't have a problem. In power outage, I've never had a problem. That's another thing I'm looking at. So another reason why I'm upgrading this one back to the stock frame. This one here, if I turn on crash detection, I get random Y issues. The bed doesn't seem to be bad, the Y bearings, but I don't know, it's got a plastic part instead of a metal part, or it's going to get the new I've actually got the new MK3